This episode of The Capsule in Conversation is brought to you by Harrogate Springwater. Harrogate is the home of the British Spa and Britain's premium natural source water. Hello everyone, welcome back to The Capsule in Conversation. I'm Natalie Anderson and today I'm joined by author and charity director Katharine Hill to talk protecting our children from the dark side of digital to parenting post-pandemic. So settle down, turn us up and get ready to join in with our conversation. Hello all, I hope you're all well and have had a lovely week. I can't believe that today is our last episode of this series. Where the heck have the last 14 weeks gone, eh? But fear not, we will be back later on in the year, yay, with hopefully as well no more mentions of lockdowns. It's safe to say that the pandemic has dominated a lot of our chats over the last 12 months, but as we look to return to some kind of normality in the coming months, hopefully a smooth exit will mean that that is the last of it. However, we're still not quite out of the woods just yet, and my special guest today is here to help us with one of our biggest challenges: how to get our children back out into the world post-pandemic. With a career in family law, the charity director of Care for the Family, and the author of A Mind of Their Own, Building Your Child's Emotional Wellbeing in a Post-Pandemic World, amongst many other highly successful parenting books, she is more than equipped to give her professional insight and expert advice on how best to navigate these tricky roads. It is the wonderful Katharine Hill. Hi, Katharine.
Hi there. Thank you so much for welcoming me onto this podcast. It's great to be with you.
I'm so thrilled to have you. Honestly, you know, this next phase it's so difficult. I mean, it's been difficult anyway. So to have somebody like yourself to just almost hold our hands as we, you know, kind of go through this next tricky phase is brilliant. But before I go on to discuss, you know, your amazing new book, as I mentioned in my introduction, you are the UK Director of Care for the Family, which is a charity dedicated to supporting family life in all its very many forms, from general support with marriage, co-parenting, testing times, bereavement. I mean, just tell me a little bit more about your role and why the charity is so important to you.
Well, as you mentioned in the introduction, I used to be a family lawyer. Then I stopped that when we had our 4 children. And I think as a lawyer, I saw the heartbreak of when family life doesn't really turn out as people had hoped. You know, so many broken dreams, shattered lives. And it made me want to do something upstream, something to help build strong family life in the good times, so that people were prepared for when the testing times come along, because those testing times, I think we're aware more than ever now, but they come to all of us.
Yes.
So that's how I got involved with Care for the Family, probably 20 years ago now. And my role, I'm on the leadership team, and I also write and speak at our events. We've got loads of online events, and pre the pandemic, we spent our time going around the country. Hopefully we'll do that again, but that's mainly my role. And as you say, in all those different areas of family life.
And that's it, isn't it? Family life. I mean, crikey, you know, you have these dreams and aspirations that it's going to be just, you know, 2.4 children or whatever it is for you. And then you get into the reality of it. And all of a sudden, all of these challenges are thrown at you. And you've no idea sometimes what you're doing. And genuinely, you're like, can somebody please help me? And then, you know, your books, and particularly the book that we're going to discuss shortly, I mean, I nearly cried reading parts of it. I was like, yes, thank you. Somebody understands the struggle, because you just need that guidance sometimes, and we don't often get it, do we?
And I think we often just need to know that we're not on our own. We try all our material, we try and present very much as sort of fellow travelers. You know, we all get this stuff wrong, but nevertheless, there's stuff that we can do to help us and sort of markers on the way. And we talk about being the fence around the top of the cliff. more than the ambulance at the bottom. So of course we want to come alongside families when they are in difficulty and in crisis, but more than that, this is about everyday family life and like you say, all the stuff that we can do.
This week, well, our podcast now that we're on is kind of marks the end of Mental Health Awareness Week. And some of the stats that I read from my research with this particular podcast, I was so shocked at. You know, if you look at in July 2020 of last year, 1 in 6 children from the ages of 5 to 19 were struggling with mental health issues. I find that quite terrifying. And obviously, we've had another year since then. And protecting our children's mental health is so vital, isn't it? I mean, we never really talked about that, you know, even 10 years ago, but the conversation has changed so much, hasn't it?
Absolutely, it really has. And I think in the same way that as parents, we can help our children grow physically. So we don't think twice about getting them to eat their broccoli and, teaching them how to swim, how to cross the road safely, all those kind of things, limiting screen time. And we know about that. But what we can do, and is as important, is help them grow emotionally. And I think, not a week has gone by without these terrifying stats in the media about overstretched services and rising rates of depression and anxiety in our young people. And we're seeing that at Care for the Family as well, in the number of families that are contacting us for help. Parents themselves getting anxious about their children's anxiety. So absolutely, it's so important. And I think even more important because of the last year that we've all lived through.
Well, this is it, because, I'm looking at the Duchess of Cambridge and her early years project, and some of the things that she said about why she was interested in that is because some of the other work that she was doing, she was seeing that with a lot of people, their problem started very early on, because, from the ages of 0 to 5 is when we take on a lot of learned behaviour, which is why she's dedicated her time to, it's not just one or the other, it's looking after both sections, isn't it? Both the adult and the child. You might think you're being the best parent ever, but if you're also dealing with psychological problems or stress or anxiety, unbeknownst to you, you may well just be passing that on to your children. So you've got to look at both sides of the spectrum, don't you?
You absolutely do. In fact, I was talking to a psychologist recently about what can parents do to help their children in this moment now when we're seeking to come out of lockdown. And I was chatting to her as well, just when a lot of kids were really struggling with the whole school closures and just, having to manage what was going on. And she said it's counterintuitive, but one of the most important things that we can do is to look after our own well-being. When you get on an aeroplane and it sounds odd, but they say, put your own oxygen mask on before you help someone else. And I think that is so true in relation to family life and emotional well-being. And maybe that's a bit of a relief. It's not something we have to do to our children, but it might be just, running a bath, having a cup of tea on the back step and getting a breather. It might be going for a run or whatever it is that really will help us sort of regenerate and just get a bit refreshed. Then that will really help us in our parenting.
I think so too. And I've talked about it an awful lot on this podcast over the last 4 series, the whole mantra of it is not selfish to self-care. In fact, some of the best things that you can do is look after you, so that when your child is perhaps being, a child, answering back, troublesome, being whatever age they might be, it doesn't throw you off kilter. You're not so quick to react, because actually your levels aren't sky high. They're just in a more relaxed place. Because I found, particularly in this lockdown, in this pandemic, that I was working from home. I was trying to do everything I possibly could, trying to homeschool, completely overstretched. And everything that my son did was irritating me. And I just get, can you just be still? Can you just not move? And it's basically, and he turned around and went, do you just want me to not be 8? Oh. And I was like, my heart was broken. And I was like, yeah, that's basically what I'm putting on him, isn't it? I'm telling him not to be a child. And how horrible is that? But I'm sure I'm not alone. I'm sure there are many people that have gone through the same experiences of me over this last 12 months. I mean, what have been the biggest things that you've seen over the last 12, 18 months? What have parents been coming to you with?
Yes, so many things. And I love that story of your son,
I
actually. I think
know.
that's really poignant. But we've heard of many mums saying, I can't tell you the number of times I've just locked myself in the loo and had a good cry, because it is impossible to try and homeschool and homework and just manage life really with all that anxiety. But I think there's several things that our children have really struggled with, and little ones as well as teenagers. So I have two little grandchildren, and I took them to the park recently, just as lockdown was lifting. And I realized they had no idea how to interact with other children. They didn't really know how to play, how to take turns on the slide. And little ones have missed out on all of that. And then primary school children, they haven't had the birthday parties and the sports days and the sleepovers and all the fun stuff. And then for our teens, I think it's been particularly tough, because this is that developmental stage when they're meant to be striking out and working out who they are and seeking independence away from us, their parents. And just at this time now, they're holed up at home and grounded. And I said to someone the other day, I think now parents of teenagers will think twice before grounding their teens for a few weeks. But it's been incredibly, incredibly tough for them to manage all this continual change. And many children, I think, have found that they are suffering from anxiety. A lot of little ones have had setbacks in things like potty training and speech and language development, and many teens just not as ready to step out and take risks and do stuff as they were before. And then, of course, the whole thing about the digital age. I've written a book called Left to Their Own Devices, Confident Parenting in a World of
I
Screens.
saw that book and I was like, I need to get that one.
It's probably a whole other hour to chat on that one. But they've had to run their life on screens, their schoolwork as well as their social life. And again, that's often been a more colourful place than at home, which has just been the same day in, day out. And so a whole load of pressures on them there as well, to measure their worth and their like by how much they're liked, by how many likes they have on social media and all that. So it really is, and I don't think parents probably need me to tell them that, but it's a perfect storm. So I just think for parents to take a deep breath and say, this is hard, but we're doing all right.
I think that's it, isn't it? Because you can literally just end up just absolutely crucifying yourself with, I'm doing it all wrong, I'm doing it wrong, and then that spiral starts again, because then you end up in that bad place, and then it just becomes this vicious cycle of negativity, and you have to stop. And I think now is the perfect opportunity. In the next week, things are going to change. We are going to get hugs, which is unbelievable. We've already made overnight dates with our grandparents for Fred to see his grandparents, which is just amazing and magical, and he can't wait. So I think we're at a point now where we can take that breath. And your book, which again, oh my God, it's just amazing and really made me emotional reading it. So it's A Mind of Their Own, Building Your Child's Emotional Wellbeing in a Post-Pandemic World. And there's so many brilliant chapters in there. If we delve in though to kind of the chapter 20, I think it is, which is the one which is kind of how to manage post-pandemic. As you've just said then, we've had kids that have been on screens, they've become their life. Getting them to move away from that, how do we do it? How help?
That's a really good question. And I think one of the things I talk about is having something, so this is not in a pandemic, but we say to parents, why don't you have something called a family media agreement? Now, it sounds a bit sort of highfalutin, but all it means is you get your kids, however old they are, if they're 2 or 8 or 16 or whatever, get them all around the table and you make it a fun thing. You get some snacks and drinks and make it a nice evening, and you all talk together about what the ground rules are for use of screens in the home. And it will cover things like, do you have screens in the bedroom? Do you have them at the meal table? And what kind of platforms are they allowed on? How long maybe are they allowed on screens? All those kind of things. The world's your oyster. But the rub is that the parents sign up to this as well. So you make this agreement and you might have, yes, you can, no, you can't, ask us first. 3 columns, something like that, and think about what would you do if they cross the the boundary. And so I talk about why don't you do that as a really good basis for managing screen time in the home. Well, of course, then we had the pandemic, and it's like the rule book has been thrown up in the air, because of course they've got to be on screens. So I've just suggested in the book, why don't you rip that up and just do the same again, and just talk about what it's like now, because it is different now. But I think having some ground rules that everyone signs up to, and particularly, I would say, if there was one thing, it would be don't have screens in the bedroom if you can help it at night. It might be that they have to do their homework in their room and that's the only place, and that's fine. But screens, having that phone by their bed. We've had kids who have been setting alarms just to check on their Instagram feed at 2 a.m, and little ones going to school exhausted, and they absolutely don't need these things whirring around their head all night. And so many of them say, but it's my alarm clock. So you think, well, buy them an alarm clock. These things do exist. So I think having some boundaries in place, but realizing it's more about what they're doing online than the amount of hours. And I think that's really important. So there's so many great things that they can do online, and they may be in touch with friends, they may be doing their homework, but looking at what they do in the same way you look at what they eat, looking at what they're consuming on screens is another good thing.
Well, because like with my son in the pandemic, he got a little gaming headset, and that was the only way, because I refused to let him have a phone because he's only 8, but I said, okay, you want to keep in contact. So for him, that was the only way, and he's an only child, that he could keep in contact with his friends. Now obviously he's back at school now, so we're trying our best to kind of filter out the headset kind of evening gaming, and we have a cut-off point of like the time that he has to stop. But then he'll say, oh, but now I need to watch YouTube to fall asleep. And we have had so many rows about this, because I'm like, no, you don't. It's not good for you. The blue light's really bad. But he's become so dependent on it. And I'm kind of like, I don't want to row, so I just don't know what to do.
That's really tough. And I think do things gradually. So like you say, there's 3 styles of parenting I talk about in the book. So there's one that's authoritarian. So that's like the sergeant major, and there are masses of rules on absolutely everything. You brush your teeth this way, you line your shoes up in the hall this way, and every single one is enforced. Then the other end is the permissive parent, which is anything goes, no rules, do what you like. And what we want to aim for is in the middle, which is called assertive parenting, which is you make as few rules as possible, but you make the rules about the things that really, really matter, that are in accordance with your family values. And then those are the ones that you do enforce. And so it's worth thinking about what are those ones. And if it is no going to bed with YouTube, then that might be one to go for, but doing it in the context of relationship, and not feeling that we have to be our kids' best friends, because we're their parents, and they only have one mum or dad, and they've got loads of best friends. So I think all of us want our kids to be happy, but sometimes it's worth a bit of a fight. But I would say particularly now, just do it gradually, because these are tough times, and honestly, phones have just been, and digital devices in general have been such a lifeline for our kids at the moment. So that would be my
think that is the thing. And I think, as you say, this gradual process, and the return of sleepovers, the return of staying over at grandparents, I'm hoping it will become less and less and less important anyway. I just know that from speaking to a lot of friends, like we even had a mum's chat the other week, and everyone was saying the same thing, and it was like, oh wow, this is not just this is universal basically. So I think that gradual process of filtering it out. I mean, the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, which again seems to be a huge concern for many people, is the impact of social media on children. And as you said then, their worth being determined by likes, and in terms of praising and not praising, what's your take on that? Like, just talk me through some of the parts in the book that you discuss with that.
So you're so right. Social media, I mean, it's here to stay, and we don't want to be dinosaurs. It's great. And it gives our children have got so many opportunities that that we didn't have. The swipe of a screen, they can be in touch with anyone around the world. They can find out any information. So it's great, but it's how we use it. And I think the insidious nature of social media is that our children, they forget that other people are only posting the highlights. So maybe there's a couple of them have gone out into town and they've pre-pandemic probably, but tried on some clothes, or maybe they're at home and they've put filters on and they've posed about 20 times for these pictures, and they're not real life. Or they're putting up images of this wonderful time they've had in the pandemic, and the other child is looking at them thinking, my life's just not like that, and I don't look like that. And so then there's a pressure for them to try and match that. And so our children are creating identities on social media that bear no relation to real life. And then a gap develops, and then they feel they have to meet up with that and keep up with that. And you're absolutely right. So for the first time, I think, in history, our children have got a number that is placed on their worth and on their identity. So how many followers they have and how many likes they've got. And so I think as parents, if we can come alongside them and talk to them about that, give them a little bit of a reality check, and it can be in the everyday things of life. So maybe we see an advert or something on YouTube, and we might say, do you think that person really looks like that? This is boys as well. So
yeah,
there's
definitely
a massive
boys.
Pressure, the whole 6-pack and looking cool. And there's stuff in, I think little and often is the best way to talk about these things. So rather than the big talk, which most of them don't really like, and we don't like either, just dropping it into the conversation and that role modeling how we deal with our social media as well, our relationship with our phone. And then there's all the stuff about bullying, isn't there? When I was little, if you were bullied at school, the bully tended to stay at school at the end of or at least, you left them behind at the end of the school day. But for our children, they can follow them home in their pocket, in their phone as they eat their tea, as they do their homework. And, the phone just pings under the duvet at night and the bully's there. So again, massive pressures, but talking about them and building their emotional resilience through helping them manage these pressures is something that we can do as parents. And it's about equipping them to manage these things when we're not there. Because I often say we're not bringing up children or teenagers, we're bringing up adults. And so our aim is to get them to stand on their own 2 feet and to be able to manage this themselves when we're not there.
I think for me, the best thing that I spoke to Freddie about was the block button, and
yes.
And him having the control. I was like, nobody has control over you. In fact, you have control. You can leave this situation anytime you want, and you can put a closed door on it and say, actually, I don't want anything to do with you now. I'm done, and walk away from the situation. Particularly, this was really important to me in the online space, because he had a moment in the pandemic when he'd been online and he was just in tears. And I said, "What's the matter?" And he went, "I can't go anywhere without being told off, or without somebody making me feel bad." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you and Daddy are cross because I don't do my work." He said, "and then I'm online with my friends and they are all saying horrible things about me, and I don't feel like I can go anywhere." And my heart was again broken, but we had a very deep conversation about it, and he told me about these people, what they'd been saying. And I said, right, whenever you feel like that, you leave the situation, you remove yourself, and then you come back into our happy space. I said, I know me and Daddy have been cross, but it's been hard for everyone, darling. But ultimately, our home is a good, happy home. You don't have to keep yourself in that environment. And it's like what you were saying, and again, another chapter of your book of it's okay to be emotional, to have those chats and to listen to their little worries and concerns and not just brush them off, because they're really serious.
That's so good, Natalie. Honestly, it just sounds like that was such a great conversation, because you empowered him to, take some initiative himself, but also to express what he was feeling, and I know when our children were little, I was so often wanting life to be okay for them. I wanted them, to be happy and to be okay. And very often I didn't do that. I just, oh, you'll be fine, rather than listening and allowing them to express how they feel. And you're right, there's a chapter called It's Okay to Be Sad. And of course we don't want them to be sad all the time, but it's a really healthy place to be able to express how they feel, and just like you've explained, to be able to talk them through it.
Because that's the thing, isn't it? I found this with my son. He's so smart and so clever that you can't baby them. You can't just go, oh, they're kids. Because especially these children feel so much more grown up. Like they just feel like their conversation is clever, it's intelligent, they're consuming so much media that what an 8-year-old in my generation would have been like, outside riding your bike and messing around. These young children, from tiny ones right up to teenagers, obviously, seem to be much more progressive and much more forward thinking. So for me, I suppose it's about not babying them and listening to their genuine concerns. And like I said, I by no stretch of the imagination know what I'm doing most of the time, but I think I do worry about Fred's well-being and emotional health, because I think it's important that he doesn't get pushed aside. And would you agree that that's, not babying children?
Absolutely. And I think as adults, we might think that, they might know more than us about Minecraft or whatever other game it is, but we have more of life experience than them. We know how life generally works, and they don't. And so I think we know our child best. No one loves them like us. No one knows them like us. And they're all different personalities. So something that might cause one child to be incredibly anxious, another might just take in their stride. And so again, I think just being able to talk to them at the level that they're able to, and finding moments to do that. So it's easier for little ones because we're more or less in control, and we can bath time, story time, bedtime, we can find those little moments. Maybe a friend of mine said her son's 8, and she said she reads him a story at night. She said, I don't need to, he can read perfectly well, but it's a real snuggly moment when they have a little chat. And then teenagers, it's much harder. But again, seizing those moments where we can, in the car, maybe meal times, or usually late at night, but just grabbing those moments to connect, and that makes all the difference.
As you were saying earlier, there's a few other things as well of measuring themselves, and there's a part of the book which is that it's okay to be ordinary. So many kids want to be, and I know, like we did when we were kids, I want to be on the telly, or I want to be this, or I want to be that. But now all the kids seem to want to just be famous, and it's like, it's all right to just be. You just talk me through that part as well.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite chapters, actually. It's okay to be ordinary. And I think our children, you're exactly right, they're growing up in a world where there's such pressure to be extraordinary. And I love all those talent shows on the TV, but Britain's Got Talent, The Apprentice, The Voice, Love Island, the Bake Off, they've made the everyday things of life, cooking, baking, singing, falling in love. They've made them into a competition, with one pitched against the next. And we can't all be extraordinary. That's the very nature of it. But our children can be unique, and they can know that they can be the best that they can be. But we can help them just not feel that they have to be pitched against others and to be extraordinary, because there's such a pressure in that. And I think one of the things I talk about in that is not praising them for anything and everything they do, but really being specific about the things we praise them for, and really focusing on things like effort and character and those qualities, finding the things that they're good at and encouraging them in those, but not joining in with the world and putting the pressure on.
Because as you said then, and it's really hard to not do this. And, your child scores a goal and you're like, oh my God, you're amazing, you're brilliant and everything, but actually they might not be the best footballer. But it's like saying, you know, I do it. I'm like, oh wow, you were fabulous, but I know that really my son isn't as, you know, brilliant as football. There's like some of his other friends who are genuinely dedicated to it. You know, they go to every club, everything. But I can't help being the mum that's like, super excited. And because then I feel like, oh well, I don't want him to feel like I'm not excited. It's the way that we praise, isn't it? You know, you've said in it that we should praise in the, like you said, the character of, I know how hard you've worked to do that. I know that that's taken you a long time. It's a real achievement, rather than just you're the best.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and of course, I mean, as mums, I'm like you know, I would be the biggest person to be cheering them on for anything and everything that they did. But if that's the only thing that they hear, then that's no good. So it's not about not praising our children. There's a proverb that says that our words have the power of life, and we literally can be speaking life to our children by praising them and encouraging them. So it's really important, and we mustn't throw the baby out with the bathwater on this one. But I think important to recognize praising effort. There's something called growth mindset that's taught in quite a lot of schools, and it's basically saying that there's two different sorts of mindset. There's fixed mindset, that means that your ability is fixed. So if you're rubbish at something, rubbish at maths, you'll always be rubbish at maths. But also if you're good at something, you're good at dancing, you'll always be good at it. But there's no room for change. But the growth mindset means that you're good at something because you've worked hard at it. So there's always room for improvement. And again, that's a great one to bear in mind when we're praising our children and encouraging them to work hard at the things that they want to work hard at and that they enjoy, and knowing that sometimes it's okay to fail.
And are kids born with those different mindsets? Do we have those mindsets from the off, or is that something that we can adopt?
Well, I think researchers say that it's something that we learn. So it's great to think that we can learn that at school, we can learn that in the home. I'm sure some personalities are going to more easily orbit to one of those rather than the other. But it is something that we can learn. And that's one of the things that I love about the way our brains are made, in that there's something called the plasticity of the brain. And it means it's not static. And all through our childhood, but even in adult life, we're always able to learn, always able to do things in different ways, always able to change patterns of thinking. So parents have got absolutely everything to play for in this. They really need to be encouraged.
And this brings me on to like the next topic as well, which is, you know, if you have a high achiever or an underachiever, how do you support those children? Because again, I feel like we've lost this huge bulk of education in the last 18 months. And something that's really concerned me with my son particularly is that he's gone from being like that little babyish age, you know, year 2, year 3, to suddenly he'll be in year 5 in September. And I'm like, well, it feels like we've only had a few weeks of year 4. And these are really important defining lessons that I don't feel like I've been able to teach him very well. You know, he's not had that proper schooling. What do we do? You know, how can we make up for lost time, or how can we support them through their learning if they've got to catch up, you know, especially with like teens and things, that those exams or whatever, they could change their lives. How do we navigate this next part?
So I think is really important, isn't it? And I think our schooling is important in terms of our ability to build emotional well-being in our lives. And our kids have had the rug pulled out from under them this year. They really have. So I think in terms of, you mentioned at the beginning, there's the high achievers.
Yeah.
So often that's the girls, but not always. And they are really anxious because many of them in the teenage years, they haven't had the time to prove themselves, haven't been able to prove themselves. They've worked super hard for these exams, and then suddenly they're going to be assessed by teachers. And so they feel out of control for that. And a lot of boys have really missed the sport, I think, as well as the academic stuff. So I think in terms of the high achievers, is talking to them about what really matters. What are the things that, you know, our wellness is a much better marker of success actually for the rest of life than the grades. But the grades are important. So for the ones that are getting stressed about the not having exams, helping them to step back and to see the bigger picture, knowing that they've done their best, they can't do more than that, and just talking to them about that. There's one idea of if they're getting very stressed and sort of focusing a lot on their work, you could get a little color coding thing for their diary. And so you put a red mark against something that's super stressful, you put an orange against something that's neutral, and green against the things that are really going to help them relax. And the rule is that you must have only one of the red things every day. You must have at least one orange and more than one of the greens, and that's just a really practical way of helping them wind down a bit. But then there's the other ones you couldn't care less, and you need a bit of a kick to get going. So we can't win, can we? We can't win. But with those, again, just helping them, remembering that they develop at different stages. So we got two of our boys were born in September, and the difference between them and their children who were born in August,
like my son is in August,
it's massive, isn't it? A whole year difference, really. So I think that's the just recognizing those things, and that they've got their own, they will develop at their own pace, and there will be a time when we have to get them to knuckle down, and that can be hard, but they will do it. They'll find their level. And it's not all about the grades. And I think maybe the pandemic's given some children just a chance to stand back and to think about other things that they want to achieve in life. And not just about the pieces of paper, important as they are. And just a shout out for teachers as well, because I think they've done such a great job this year, really have, against
absolutely
all the
odds.
odds.
It's been so hard for them. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's kind of, we're so used to, with the way our school system works, with all these markers of achievement all along the way, really, that we have to have an allowance of acceptance for where we are at the minute and go, actually, those markers don't apply to these children, because it's not fair to do that, and as parents we have to recognize that, as teachers as well, and I'm sure the teachers more than anybody do recognize that. But I think even future employers need to see that if it was 2020, give these kids a bit of slack. And I think together as a society, that's something else that we can do kind of collectively to protect our the well-being of our kids, because our kids do need to know that they're not going to be measured the same that maybe kids 2 years above them are going to be measured. They're not. They need to understand so that they can take a bit of pressure off themselves. So it's just that reassurance, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. And I know there's been stuff in the media recently about that, and questioning what future employers are going to measure them against. And I think they definitely will measure them differently, because they'll know that this has just been such an unusual year. We often say at Care for the Family, don't read your kids' school reports at half time. And that's certainly true this year. And I think also just the opportunity for them to step back and to think about the important stuff. We talk a lot about they've got to catch up on their maths or their English or their science. But actually, so many of them have got big things they're anxious about. Just in terms of managing going back to school, those are the things I think as parents it's more important to concentrate on their character and how they're managing emotionally, and how we can build resilience in these times, because we really can do that. And so I would say let's focus on that and not so much on the grades, important as the grades are.
And as you said then, building resilience, would we come back to that same thing of talking, open conversation, or are there other practical things that you think that we could do?
Well, resilience is a really interesting word. It's sort of bandied around quite a lot. And there was a lovely story, I put it in the book actually, and a dad had a young boy, I think he was about 7 or 8, and he said, Dad, we've been learning about resilience at school. And the dad said, oh, really? What's resilience? And he said, oh, it's bouncing back. And then the dad said, what's bouncing back? And he said, oh, we haven't learned that bit yet. And the point was, we can't learn resilience in the classroom. We only learn it in the hard knocks of life. And often it's as we go through difficult stuff that we find that we're able to manage. Maybe there have been some setbacks, maybe there's things that haven't gone well, but our brains are such that we can be equipped then to learn from it and to do better the next time and the next time. And if you think about the generation who were children in the Second World War, we don't look back and say, oh, they were the lost generation or the damaged generation. We talk about them as being resilient and strong and resourceful. And I really believe that, hard as it is now, and it is really hard, and there's a lot of tough stuff our kids are still having to work through, but I really believe that with the right support, they'll come through it more resilient, able to bounce. Well, one of the phrases actually isn't bounce back, it's bounce forward, having learned so much from this time.
And so with that, it's okay to fail, in the sense that actually I've always thought I've been terrible as a high achiever of going, I can't fail. I mean, it's only in the last 2 or 3 years that I've actually learned to accept failure and be like, actually, failure equals growth. Prior to that, I was just like, I failed, oh my God, I didn't get a job or whatever. And I used to literally beat myself up about it. And it was actually nothing to do with like my mum or her style of parenting. She's the most supportive person in the world and has always said, it doesn't matter. It was something inherent in me that I couldn't accept it. But now I am very much more of the mindset of, actually, you have to fail sometimes to learn and grow. And that's probably the attitude I think that I'm trying to instill into Freddie. And would you say that that's kind of okay?
Very much okay. I'm just thinking, I've got the book here. I think there's a lovely bit. Michael Jordan, most people have heard of Michael Jordan, I think, the basketball player. And here we go. I just write about him in the book, and he tried out for loads and loads of basketball teams, and then, although he'd already shown himself to be quite an outstanding player, he didn't make it for the team. And he says this, he said, I went to my room and I closed the door and I cried. For a while I couldn't stop. Even though there was no one else in the house at the time, I kept the door shut. It was important that no one sees me or hears me. And he was going to give up basketball altogether, but then his mum stepped in, and rather than seeing that failure as a source of pain and just the end of the road, she, just like you said, she saw it as an opportunity for growth, and she persuaded him to pick himself up and to keep going. And he became one of the most famous basketball players of all times. And he says this, he says, I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and I've missed. I've failed over and over and over again. And that's why I succeed. And I thought that was great. And at the end of every chapter in the book, I've got these practical things that parents can do to put some of it into practice. And in the one on failure, there's quite a fun idea. It says, have a failure Friday and have a meal together, and then share stories of, you could Google them, but things that have been invented through failure. And it's things like the frisbee and the ice cream cone and Play-Doh, but then share your failures with your kids as well and what you learned from them. And again, that's just little and often those messages that, because I'm like you, I'm a perfectionist and I used to hate failure, but discovering that actually it can be the place where we learn stuff is really great.
I tell my son about The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, because he was a wrestler. And I mean, I literally could cry watching him sometimes, because I just think he didn't achieve his dream of being a football player, and he trained all his life. And then all of a sudden, he's now like the highest paid actor in Hollywood. He's got incredible businesses. He was on the front cover of Time and Forbes magazine. And he was, I think one of his quotes was, it took failure to get here. And I love that. And I'm like, look, you see, because we watch films like Jumanji and things like that. And I go, it's always okay to change direction, to pivot. If it's not going your way on this particular path, it's fine. You'll go somewhere else, and all those things that do make you great, you'll apply to something else. Because I think that's the other thing, isn't it? Is saying, if something shuts down in one area, something else will open up, and it's allowing them to see the world rather than just being one track minded, I think.
That's absolutely right. It's a bit of a theme, isn't it, that goes through
Yeah.
about being real, about failure, about not setting ourselves up in competition against others, doing our absolute best, finding our identity, finding, the me that we want to be, are so important. And parents really are best placed to help our kids do this, which I think is an encouragement. I really do. In that, the home is where we learn all these things. And of course, there's a chapter in the book called It Takes a Village. And I talk about, youth leaders and teachers and sports coaches and all those people that are so important, grandparents, that can come alongside our kids as well, because we don't have to do it all alone.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask you actually about, for those people that are single parents, or, that are carers, guardians, how can they take their children through this time if they are just the one, as you just mentioned, they're youth leaders, clubs, after school clubs? I mean, what's your advice on that?
So at Care for the Family, we've got some fantastic resource for single parents. So if anyone wants to head to our website and look for that, if you're parenting on your own, because it's tough. You haven't got somebody else coming in to help you. And, when things go wrong, like they always do in all our families. But I would say the principles in the book are appropriate for whatever your shape and size of family, and whatever age your children. But this sense of we do this together, it's too hard to do it on our own. And that's why the pandemic's been so hard, because many of us have felt so isolated and alone. But for single parents, absolutely, to if there are extended family that can come alongside, role models that can come on in, other people who in different community settings, churches, sports facilities, and whatever it is, just find people that we know. It's important that we trust them, but having people that can come on in, and particularly grandparents, I think can be such a great source of support and help. And sometimes when our kids are older, they'll talk to those people more than they talk to us. And rather than just being a bit miffed about that, I think let's just embrace that and build those relationships. Like for our kids, I can think of some really key people who have really been there for them in the tough times in the teenage years.
I think that's it, isn't it? It's admitting and going, it's okay. It's because in the old days, those children have been passed from pillar to post, and you know what I mean, that old-fashioned phrase that would make somebody feel really bad and feel shamed. But actually, it's all right to reach out, and it's okay to feel like, if it's friend, if it's mum of your child's friend, or somebody like that, or a best friend, or your sisters, brothers, whoever. Because you do need a break. And it's like going back to what we said at the very beginning, you need to be healthy, you need to be in the right state of mind. And if you're frazzled, then that's only going to create an even more stressful situation in the home. It's fine to allow other people to co-parent, so to speak. That is an age-old saying about it takes a village to raise a child. There's a reason for that, isn't there?
There really is. And I can think of times when I've had particularly when our children were teenagers, and anything I said was falling on deaf ears. But somebody else, I remember, was a friend who used to cut their hair, and my daughter was having her hair cut, and this lovely lady chatted to her about something and she said exactly the same thing, I think, that I was saying, but she listened to her because she was coming in from outside. So, and it does absolutely take a village. It really does take all of us. And that's great. I think for those of us, maybe if we are parenting with a partner, to look out for those that are parenting on their own, to try and give them a helping hand when they need it, because it is really tough and we need each other.
And this phrase of like helicopter parenting, just explain this to me a bit more, because I've heard it a few times and I'm still not 100% sure if I'm one of those or not. So will you just explain it to me?
Well, I definitely can be a helicopter parent. So, helicopter parents are parents that swoop in whenever there's any sign of trouble, to save their children from going through difficult times. With the, rotor blades whirring, in they come. So, for me, it would be things like that. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times get a text message, Mom, I've forgotten, my football boots, or the ingredients for the lemon meringue pie for my cookery class or something. And oh my goodness, they can't be without them. So I drive across town in rush hour traffic and deliver sports kit, ingredients, or whatever else. And, whilst of course they were grateful and it got them out of a scrape, I'm not always going to be there to do that. And the times when I couldn't do it, maybe I was at work or just wasn't around, they usually found a way around it. I think our son was yet to miss a football match because he'd forgotten his boots. He'd find a pair to borrow, and actually we're depriving them. If we're always helicopter parents swooping in to do that, we're depriving them of the opportunity to get stronger and to find their way around problems themselves. So that's what helicopter parents are. We all do it. We're hardwired to protect our children. We don't like to see them struggle. But if we can step back and, as appropriate to their age, obviously, let them work some stuff out for themselves. Again, that's a really important part of building their emotional well-being.
I'm so glad you said that, because I'm going, yeah, I am one of those. And if I can't do it for whatever, if I can't meet their needs or like Fred's needs, I will literally punish myself all day about it and feel like the guiltiest person in the world. But actually, it is character building. It is, they do have to learn. They do have to have consequences. If they don't get their homework done, they have to face the consequences for themselves. And it's really hard though, isn't it? You just want to fix it. You want to fix it all. But then at the same time, you kind of go, oh, be more responsible. Well, if you keep going in there to fix it, then they'll never learn. But yeah, I think that is definitely a parenting masterclass that you need to give on that one, because that's so tough. But I think, ultimately, it does very much all come back to this healthy conversations, talking, and allowing for mistakes or failures, or not wrapping them in cotton wool, because we've seen the world can be a scary place, and as much as we want to protect them, we have to allow them to be who they are as well, don't we?
We do. And part of this is discovering their identity, finding out who they are. And there's some really great research about this that says that one of the things that's important for them, particularly in the teenage years, is being part of, and this researcher calls it, part of something bigger than me mindset. So that's why so often they want to be part of a campaign for, whether it's climate change, Black Lives Matter, those important social justice issues. Many of our young people are right on the front foot of them, which is fantastic. But it gives them that sense of purpose. And, it may be faith, it may be whatever your circumstances, helping our children just to be part of something bigger than them. I think maybe that's why they often want to be part of a tribe, with their friends, and working out then just who they are, because that's the question we all ask. Who am I, and what's my place in the world? And we can be a sounding board for them, but ultimately it's about accepting them for who they are and showing them that we love them, whatever. That's the foundation.
We have that conversation, me and Fred, a lot, because if I correct him on something that I'm thinking, no, I'm just trying to, it might be spelling, just little things, he'll go, but that's how I do it. And I'm like, I know, but I know that's how you do it, but it's not really the right way. Well, what do you mean it's not? And he's very clever in his conversation, and I'm kind of like, I know I have to correct you on this, but at the same time, and this is what made it really hard during the pandemic, was when I was being mum that was like, take your shoes off, don't do this, don't do that, but then having to be teacher correcting him as well. All I felt like was the eraser all the time, just rubbing out all aspects of him, so it's different when it's shared out with a different voice, but when it's just you. And I was thinking, is this really bad for our relationship, that he just thinks that all I'm doing is correcting him? do you know what I mean? I'm hoping that will get undone, and I hope it's not going to be like long lasting, because as you say, when they come back at you with a response similar to that, what do you say?
So that's a hard one, isn't it? And normally, if we weren't in a pandemic and you weren't homeschooling, you say, well, I think I would spell it that way, and I think your teacher might agree, but let's see what she says. And you could give it to the teacher to do, couldn't you? But when you are being the teacher, that's why it's been so hard, I think, and why we've got to give ourselves a lot of slack. And it's been hard for our kids as well in terms of coming out of the pandemic. I think that a lot of us as adults, we can think life was normal, then we had the pandemic, and hey, we're going back to normal again soon, even if normal looks a little bit different. But our children haven't got that sort of foundational sense, and so they had normal and, oh my goodness, massive change. And for them, going back into school or whatever else is yet more change, which is why they're finding it so hard. And it's not just like flicking a switch, which I think, so we've just got to give them a lot of slack. And like we were saying earlier, just doing things gradually and allowing them to do the fun stuff bit by bit. Because a lot of their emotional tank is being used up already on stress. So they haven't got much left, I don't think, for other things. So but we'll get there.
So moving forward as well, injecting a bit of fun and a bit of lightheartedness and enjoying these newfound freedoms. Do you think that will be the first step for us for, getting them back out into the world and doing it gradually, with whether it's allowing a friend to come over or them to go to a friend's, just coaxing them into those normal steps of fun and lightheartedness?
Fun and laughter are so important, and particularly in this last year, it's not about saying everything's fun when it isn't, but finding moments even within the tough stuff. There's a proverb that says something like a cheerful heart is good medicine, and there's science that tells us that when we laugh, it's actually good for us, and it increases the endorphins, increases our sense of well-being. So whatever it is that's fun and that you can laugh at together. So had a friend recently, and her son was very anxious about going back to his football club. He didn't want to do it, and so she said what she did in the end, she just got him to go and have fun kicking a football around in the park with his friend, and that enabled him just to get back into enjoying life again. And he's not yet back at the club, but I think he will be. So finding those moments, whatever it is, watching a fun film together, gaming, doing stuff outside, having a laugh, getting old photos. They love looking at photos often, don't they? I think of, family photos of when they were little and all kinds of things we can do. But fun is a really, really important part, I think, of it.
I think that's definitely the first step for us, is that, we want to inject a bit of fun. I think we will be coming up to the end of this school year very soon. And I think for the summer, if we're allowed to, we're going to just try and enjoy it as much as we can and see friends and see family, to just put us back on that slightly fluffier cloud before September comes. Just give us that bit of a break, of some respite from what has been difficult, and hopefully any damage that we feel like we may have done as parents might just kind of disappear a bit, because I'm sure we all do have a bit of guilt, but I think for us that's going to be our first step.
I think guilt comes with the umbilical cord for mums. And honestly, I would just say, let's put down the guilt. We've all just done the best we can, and it has been really tough. And I think looking that in the eye and giving ourselves a pat on the back and saying, okay, we've made mistakes, of course we have, but there is so much we've all learned from it. And there have been, incredibly painful things for many, but there have been some positives about being at home together, and just maybe working out what are the things that we want to take with us. Do we want to still be on this rat run of a million after school clubs, or have we got new ways of doing stuff together at home that we can take into the year ahead?
Honestly, Katharine, thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely amazing to have you with me. Honestly, literally, I've been like, oh, what about this and what about that? So, thank you so much. It's been fabulous.
No, well, I've really, really enjoyed it. If anyone wants to get the book, the best place is muddypearl.com. That's the publishers, but and at Care for the Family, we've just got loads of stuff for people to check out that will help in family life in all different ways. So love people to check that out as well. But it's been so fun being with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yes, we are out of time for today and indeed for this series. But it has been amazing to have all you guys with me. It's been amazing to get Katharine's advice today. I hope it's been really helpful for you for this next tricky stage of post-pandemic life, but hopefully we're going to get there. We'll all be fine. And as Katharine said, her book, A Mind of Their Own, Building Your Child's Wellbeing in a Post-Pandemic World, it's available online at Muddy Pearl, but also you can get it in good bookshops as well, Waterstones, Amazon. So please do go and check the book out, and also Care for the Family too. For more wellbeing, fashion and beauty, you can visit us at our website, www.thecapsule.co.uk, where you can also catch up with our previous podcast episodes by visiting the In Conversation page and subscribing to any of our podcast channels and YouTube. Even though we will be gone for a little bit, please do leave us your rates and reviews. If you're a social butterfly, you can also catch us on Instagram and Facebook at Official Capsule. Again, thank you so much for listening over the last 14 weeks. It has been wonderful to have you with me. I've absolutely loved being able to bring you these conversations of inspiration through what has been a very difficult time for many of us. I hope you've enjoyed them. Thank you also so much to my incredible special guests who've all been so kind and generous with their time. Also, a huge thank you to our brilliant partners, Harrogate Springwater, for supporting us this series. We could not have done it all without you, so thank you. I will be back later in the year with more special guests and maybe a few surprises, but all that's left for us to say today is goodbye. So it's goodbye from Katharine.
Bye. Bye-bye.
And goodbye from me. Bye, guys. This episode of The Capsule in Conversation was brought to you by Harrogate Springwater. Bottled at source, Harrogate Spring offers a pure, refreshing taste with a delicate blend of naturally occurring minerals and electrolytes, perfect for healthy hydration.